August 21, 1942, 2:30 a.m., Alligator Creek, Guadalcanal. You're a Marine machine gunner crouched behind a water-cooled Browning .30 cal on a narrow sandbar where a creek meets the Pacific. The jungle behind you is black. The ocean in front of you is blacker. For 3 hours, you've been listening to something moving in the darkness across the water. Voices, low and disciplined, metal scraping metal, the kind of sounds that mean they're coming. Then a flare pops overhead, white phosphorus turning night into noon, and you see them. Hundreds of Japanese soldiers in the creek bed, bayonets fixed, screaming Banzai. As they charge straight at your position in a human wave so dense you don't even need to aim. You just press the trigger and hold it down. The Browning bucks against your shoulder, 600 rounds per minute, and the tracers draw red lines into the mass of bodies splashing through the water, and they keep coming. Even as men fall, even as the creek turns red, even as your barrel starts to glow orange in the dark, they keep coming. Because Colonel Kiyonao Ichiki told them the Marines would break. He told them Americans were soft, cowardly, that one good bayonet charge would send them running into the jungle. He wrote in his diary that this would be easy. By sunrise, 87% of his regiment will be dead. And the myth of Japanese invincibility dies with them. Colonel Kiyonao Ichiki is not some parade ground officer playing soldier. He's a combat veteran of China, Manchuria, and the brutal campaigns where the Imperial Japanese Army carved through poorly armed Chinese divisions like they were conscripts on a training exercise. His 28th Infantry Regiment, the Ichiki Detachment, are kicking high, elite troops hardened by years of war, blooded in bayonet assaults that broke enemy lines from Nanking to the Yangtze. Ichiki believes in sation, spirit, will, the idea that Bushido and fighting spirit can overcome material disadvantage. It's a philosophy baked into Japanese military doctrine. Superior morale and aggression will shatter a defensive line faster than artillery. And for years, against disorganized Chinese forces, against colonial troops in Malaya and the Philippines, it worked. Banzai charges carried positions. Night attacks created panic. The bayonet became a psychological weapon as much as a physical one. So when Ichiki is ordered to reinforce Guadalcanal in mid-August 1942, he's not worried. He's read intelligence reports describing the Americans as effeminate and lacking in fighting spirit. He's been told the Marines, barely 11,000 of them holding a narrow perimeter around Henderson Field, are isolated, undersupplied, demoralized. One hard push, the reports say, and they'll collapse. Ichiki believes it. He wants to believe it. Because if it's true, he'll be the hero who retakes Guadalcanal, who erases the humiliation of the Americans landing there in the first place, who proves that Japanese infantry are still unbeatable. On the night of August 18th, Ichiki's detachment, about 900 men from the regiment's first echelon, lands east of the Marine perimeter at Tevu Point. The rest of the regiment is still en route, but Ichiki doesn't wait. He has his orders: locate the American positions, probe their defenses, and prepare for a coordinated assault once reinforcements arrive. But Ichiki doesn't probe. He doesn't wait. He looks at the thin line of Marines dug in along a sandbar where Alligator Creek, misnamed the Tenaru by the Americans, meets the ocean, and he sees an opportunity, a weak point, a place where a fast, violent night assault can split the Marine line and roll up their flank before they know what's happening. He's fought campaigns like this before. He knows how it ends. Except this time, the men on the other side aren't Chinese conscripts with bolt-action rifles. They're United States Marines with automatic weapons, pre-registered fields of fire, and a lieutenant colonel named Edwin Pollock who's been expecting him. Lieutenant Colonel Edwin Pollock commands the 2nd Battalion, 1st Marines, the unit holding the eastern flank of the Marine perimeter. His sector includes a narrow sandbar where Alligator Creek flows into the ocean, and from the moment he saw the terrain, he knew, if the Japanese come, they'll come here. It's the only obvious approach. The jungle inland is too thick for a coordinated assault. The beach to the west is exposed to naval gunfire. But the creek mouth, that's a natural choke point, 100 yards of sand and shallow water, open ground with no cover, flanked by coconut palms and tall grass where you can dig in machine guns and create interlocking fields of fire. Pollock turns it into a fortress. He places 5 water-cooled Browning M1917.30 caliber machine guns along the sandbar, each one sighted to cover the creek bed and the beach. He positions 37 anti-tank guns, normally used against armor, loaded with canister shot, essentially turning them into giant shotguns. He registers mortar fire on likely assembly areas. He strings barbed wire across the sandspit. And he tells his Marines, if they come at night, don't fire until you can see them. Wait for the flares. Make every round count. On the night of August 20th, Marine listening posts across the creek start reporting movement. Voices, the metallic clink of rifle slings and entrenching tools. At 1:00 a.m., a patrol spots Japanese soldiers gathering in the coconut grove on the far side of the creek. Pollock passes the word, stand to. They're coming. At 2:30 a.m., the first wave hits. It starts with a few scattered rifle shots, Japanese scouts testing the Marine line, trying to draw fire, trying to locate the machine guns. Pollock's men hold their discipline. Don't shoot. Not yet. Then a flare goes up, white star cluster, hanging in the sky like a miniature sun, and the entire creek bed lights up. There are hundreds of them. Japanese infantry in formation, bayonets fixed, wading through knee-deep water, screaming Banzai, Banzai, as they charge straight at the Marine positions with the kind of reckless courage that breaks poorly trained defenders. But these aren't poorly trained defenders. Private First Class Johnny Rivers, a machine gunner from Tennessee, opens fire first. His Browning roars long, sustained bursts, the kind of fire discipline they drilled into him at Quantico, and the tracers stitch across the creek bed. Men fall. Others keep coming. Rivers keeps firing. The barrel of his gun starts to glow. His assistant gunner pours water from a canteen over the jacket to cool it. The gun keeps hammering. Up and down the line, the other Brownings open up. The 37 guns fire canister, hundreds of steel balls spraying into the packed mass of bodies like a claymore mine. Riflemen with Springfields and Garans pick off targets at the edge of the firelight. Mortars drop rounds into the coconut grove where more Japanese are forming up for the next wave. And the Japanese keep coming. Because Ichiki told them the Marines would break. He told them one good charge would do it. He told them the Americans don't have the stomach for close combat, that they'll panic when the bayonets get close. But the Marines don't panic. They reload. They keep firing. And by 3:00 a.m., the sandbar is carpeted with bodies and the creek is running red and the Japanese are still coming. Because Ichiki won't call it off. He can't. To retreat now would be to admit he was wrong, and Colonel Kiyonao Ichiki has never been wrong before. The thing about a Banzai charge is that it only works if the enemy breaks. If the first wave punches through, creates chaos, forces the defenders to abandon their positions and run, then the follow-up waves can exploit the gap and turn a defensive line into a massacre. That's what happened in China. That's what happened in Malaya. That's what Ichiki expects here. But the Marines don't break. Wave after wave comes across the creek, sometimes in tight formations, sometimes in loose skirmish lines, sometimes just individual soldiers sprinting through the shallows with grenades in their hands, determined to reach the Marine foxholes even if they die doing it. Some get close. A few make it to the wire. One group manages to overrun a listening post on the far edge of the sandbar, killing 2 Marines before they're cut down by rifle fire. But the line holds. Private Albert Schmid, another machine gunner, fires more than 1,000 rounds that night. His position is hit by a Japanese grenade that blinds him in both eyes and wounds his assistant gunner, but Schmid keeps firing by feel, traversing the gun left and right based on sound, on the screams and the splashing, until his loader physically pulls him off the gun and drags him to an aid station. Later, witnesses will count more than 200 bodies in front of Schmid's position. By 4:00 a.m., the assault is faltering. The Japanese are running out of men, running out of ammunition, running out of the fanatical energy that carried them into the creek in the first place. Bodies are stacked in the water. The wounded are crawling back toward the coconut grove. The living are pinned down in shell craters and behind driftwood, unable to advance, unable to retreat, just waiting for the sun to come up. And when it does, everything changes. Because at first light, Lieutenant Colonel Pollock doesn't just sit on his position and wait for the Japanese to regroup. He counterattacks. Marines from the 1st Battalion, reinforced by engineer and pioneer units, sweep across the creek and into the coconut grove. They move in fire teams. One squad provides covering fire while another advances. Textbook small unit tactics, the kind of training that separates a professional infantry force from a mob with rifles. The Japanese try to form a defensive line, but they're disorganized, leaderless, out of ammunition. Some fight to the death. Some surrender. Most die. And then the tanks arrive. The M3 Stuart light tank is not a dominant weapon of war. It's thinly armored, vulnerable to anti-tank guns, to mines, to determined infantry with satchel charges. Its 37 main gun is ineffective against heavier Japanese bunkers. In the island-hopping campaigns to come, Stuarts will be outclassed, obsolete, relegated to reconnaissance roles. But on Guadalcanal, on the morning of August 21, 1942, against infantry in the open with no anti-tank weapons, the Stuart is a nightmare. 5 of them, commanded by 1st Lieutenant Leo Case, grind across the sandbar and into the coconut grove where the remnants of Ichiki's detachment are trying to regroup. The tanks move slowly, deliberately, crushing bodies, crushing equipment, crushing any hope the Japanese have of making a stand. Their 37 guns fire high-explosive shells into clusters of soldiers. Their .30 cal machine guns rake the tree line. Marines follow behind the tanks, clearing trenches, tossing grenades into foxholes, shooting Japanese soldiers who try to hide in the undergrowth. It's not a battle, it's an execution. One group of Japanese soldiers tries to charge a tank with bayonets, and the Stuart's bow gunner cuts them down without the tank even slowing. Another group digs in behind a fallen log and opens fire with Arisaka rifles, the bullets sparking off the tank's armor like firecrackers, and the Stuart pivots and fires a single HE round that turns the log into splinters and the men behind it into memory. By 10:00 a.m., the coconut grove is silent except for the idling of tank engines and the moans of the wounded. Colonel Ichiki is not among the survivors. Accounts vary. Some say he died in the final counterattack. Others say he committed suicide when he realized the battle was lost, burning the regimental colors and shooting himself rather than face the dishonor of defeat. His body is never positively identified. What's left of his detachment, fewer than 130 men out of 900, scatters into the jungle, starving, leaderless, hunted. The Marines count their own losses: 44 dead, 71 wounded. Painful but sustainable, the kind of casualties you take when the defense holds and the enemy breaks themselves against your line. The Japanese losses are catastrophic, more than 770 dead on the battlefield, dozens more dying in the jungle from wounds and starvation over the next few days. The Ichiki Detachment, an elite regiment that had never been defeated, ceases to exist as a fighting force. And the myth, the idea that Japanese infantry are invincible, that American troops will crumble under a determined bayonet charge, dies on a sandbar in the Solomon Islands, ground into the sand under the tracks of 5 light tanks. The Battle of the Tenaru, Alligator Creek, doesn't end the Guadalcanal campaign. The Japanese will try again, bigger attacks, better coordinated, with more men and more artillery. The Marines will fight for 4 more months before the island is secured. More blood will be spilled. More desperate charges will break against Marine lines. The Japanese will lose 30,000 men trying to retake Henderson Field. But they'll never again believe the Marines are cowardly. In Tokyo, the news of Ichiki's destruction is suppressed, spun, reframed. The Imperial General Staff blames insufficient reconnaissance and premature commitment. They don't admit the real lesson, that Seishin and fighting spirit don't stop machine guns, that Bushido doesn't defeat combined arms tactics, that the U.S. Marines are not Chinese conscripts, and treating them like such is a fatal mistake. For the Americans, the Tenaru is a revelation. The Japanese are brave, fanatically so, but they're predictable. They favor night attacks, frontal assaults, human wave tactics. If you know it's coming, if you prepare your defenses, if you keep your discipline and let the Brownings do their work, you can break them. The mystique of Japanese invincibility, built on a string of easy victories against second-rate opponents, crumbles when it runs into first-rate infantry with first-rate weapons. Private Albert Schmid, the machine gunner who kept firing after being blinded, is evacuated to a hospital in the States and becomes a national hero. Hollywood makes a movie about him, Pride of the Marines, starring John Garfield, and he spends the rest of the war on Bond tour, telling the story of the night the Japanese charged into the machine guns and learned that courage isn't enough. Lieutenant Colonel Edwin Pollock is promoted and later commands a regiment in the Marshall Islands. He never talks much about the Tenaru, he's not the type, but other Marines do. They tell the story of the sandbar, the killing ground, the night the Banzai charge failed, and the lesson spreads through the Corps: hold your fire, wait for them to get close, make them pay for every yard. As for Colonel Ichiki, his name becomes a cautionary tale in Japanese military circles, a reminder that arrogance and contempt for the enemy are more dangerous than any bullet. His diary, recovered from the battlefield, contains one final entry, written hours before the assault. The Americans are not to be feared. They lack the spirit to fight. Tomorrow we will prove this. He proved something, all right. Just not what he intended. The Tenaru isn't the biggest battle of the Pacific War. It isn't the bloodiest, but it's the battle that set the tone for everything that followed. The Japanese learned they couldn't steamroll the Marines. The Marines learned they could stand toe-to-toe with the invincible Imperial Army and win. And the world learned that wars aren't decided by fighting spirit alone. They're decided by training, firepower, discipline, and the ability to turn a sandbar into a slaughterhouse when the enemy is dumb enough to charge straight at your guns. Ichiki called the Marines effeminate and cowardly. The Marines let their Brownings answer for them.